Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to those who have joined, the students of the Haidh Masterclass. As a recap to last Tuesday's class, we discussed the definitions of purities and the different types of purities, the four types of purities: tuhre sahih, valid purity; tuhre fasid, invalid purity; tuhre tam, complete purity; and tuhre naqis, incomplete purity. The two main ones, basically tuhre sahih and tuhre fasid. Tuhre sahih, valid purity, is when there is 15 days, number one. Number two, there's no mixture of blood at the start, middle, or end. Even if this means one day just before the start of the tuhar or one day after the end of the tuhar, where the bloods on either of its ends would be counted as invalid bloods. And number three, it must appear between two valid bloods. For instance, two valid haze, where the haze is, for example, 10 days and the tohar is 15 days. And after the tohar, there's another 10 days haze. So when these three conditions are found, we will count the tohar as tohar sahih, a valid purity. The tohar habit will be established and will be used in the future as a guideline to identify what will be counted as haze or not haze in an event, in a case of early bloods. The opposite to that is tuhre fasid, where it's less than 15 days, or it's mixed with blood, or it does not occur or appear between two valid bloods. The difference is valid purities are used to establish a habit, and invalid purities are not used to establish a habit. The last two, which are used interchangeably, tuhre tam, tuhre naqis, a complete purity is basically just 15 days, regardless of it being valid or invalid. And tuhre naqis is less than 15 days, 14 days, etc. And tuhre naqis can only be invalid because it can never be 15 days. And in order for something to be valid, it should at least be 15 days. So therefore, tuhre naqis can only be invalid. These are the four types of purities that we discussed. The point of discussing them is that they must a separator must exist between two haze, or after a Nifaas and another haze. So there must be a separator that separates these bloods. So the separator is important. Today we will be discussing another subject under the category or the definition of tuhre naqis. So the ruling of a deficient purity, hays tuhre naqis. Now, I'd like you to get familiar and comfortable with two terms. So one term is a separator of 15 days, and another term is a combiner or a joiner of 15 days. Right? So if it fulfills the conditions of a tuhar, it becomes a separator. If it doesn't fulfill the conditions of a tuhar and it is under 15 days, it becomes a combiner and it becomes a joiner. Right? So I'll just give you the two different views and on which view fatwa is given upon before we look at examples in understanding what is a tuhre naqis and what is a combiner and a joiner of bloods. So Imam Muhammad's view is that a deficient tuhur, a tuhre naqis, can count and counts as a separator between bloods. Number one, if the tuhur is more than 3 days, and number two, the tuhar number is more than the number of bloods on either of its sides. So here, remember, we're talking about a tuhar that is under 15 days. Now, as we learned so far, a tuhar that is under 15 days cannot be a separator, right? It is counted as one continuous flow of blood. It is a combiner, it is a joiner of blood. However, Imam Muhammad says that even if it is under 15 days, it can count as a separator, provided two conditions are found. The tuhar is more than 3 days, in other words, 4 days or more, and the tuhar, the number of days of tuhar, is more than the bloods on either of its sides. You'll understand these 2 points when we look at the examples. Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf hold the view that a deficient tuhur naqis does not count as a separator between bloods, even if it is more than 3 days, and even if the tuhur is more than the bloods on either of its sides. Like we learned so far, that if it's under 15 days, it is not a separator. It is a combiner, it is a joiner, it combines the bloods. Which view is fatwa given upon? The fatwa, the original fatwa, is given upon Imam Muhammad's view, that even if it is less than 15 days, it can count as a separator if those two conditions are found. However, the later scholars, mutaakhirun, they have given fatwa on Imam Abu Yusuf's view, and as it is more easier, facilitating, and superior. So the fatwa is not now given on Imam Muhammad's view, it's given on Imam Abu Yusuf's view. So when we talk about fatwa, etc., it means this is the view you follow. You don't follow the other view. The other view is followed when a mufti deems it suitable for you and appropriate for you in the case of need and necessity. For instance, on the occasion of Hajj, etc., if it's necessary to count it as a separator under 15 days to keep your Hajj or Umrah, etc., valid, then a mufti will give you a fatwa accordingly. But you don't follow that view, and you don't now say, you know what, I'm following this view. It's left up to a mufti to decide. These views are being presented to you to show you the differences of opinion and what fatwa is actually given upon. So in summary, you will not count a tuhar that is under 15 days as a separator. It will be counted as a combiner, as a joiner of bloods. Now let's look at 3 examples to understand the difference of opinion between Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf. So this is an example where the entire period of a deficient tuhar counts as continuous flow of blood, as a combiner, as a joiner. So let's look at an example of a beginner woman. She spots for 1 day. Then she is clean for 2 days, and then she spots for 1 day. So looking at the calendar, day 1 she spots, then on day 2 she is clean, then on day 3 she is clean, and then she spots on day 4. Right? So what we learned so far is that day 1 is a literal flow of blood. Day 2 and day 3 will be counted as legal flow of blood, and day 4 will be counted as literal flow of blood. Now, that is one way of understanding it. Another way of understanding it is that if you get any tuhar that is less than 15 days, in this case, it's 2 days of tuhar. So technically speaking, it is a tuhar naqis, it is a deficient purity. In other words, is less than 15 days. Therefore, it qualifies to be categorized as tuhar naqis, a deficient purity. So what's the rule? The rule is that it cannot be a separator. So what is it? It will be a combiner, it will be a joiner. Everything from the start of the blood to the end of the blood will be counted as one period. So you will count the flow from day 1 to day 4 as one continuous flow of blood. However, the question here is, will this tuhar, day 2 and day 3, be counted as a separator between the bloods of day 1 and day 4 or not? So the result is, firstly, it equals to 2 days of bloods and 2 days of tuhar. The tuhar is less than 3 days and is equal to the bloods on either of its sides. It counts as 4 days continuous flow of blood. Now, remember, what was the condition of Imam Muhammad's view? He said that it must be more than 4 days, and the tuhar must be more than the blood on either of its sides. If that happens, then even though it's less than 15 days, he counts it as a separator. So he's saying here that day 1 and day 4, that's 2 days of bloods. Day 2 and day 3, that's 2 days of tuhar. So looking at the tuhar, it's not more than 3 days, it's not 4 days or more. And looking at the bloods on either of its side, it's equal to the tuhar. So it doesn't fulfill both of his conditions. So like Imam Abu Yusuf, he holds the view that the entire period from day 1 to day 4 is counted as one continuous flow of blood. So we'll say that her days of spotting is actually from day 1 to day 4. So there's no difference of opinion in this example, right? Looking at the second example, which is similar, she spots for 1 day, then she is clean for 3 days, then she spots for 2 days. So day 1, she spots. Day 2, day 3, day 4, she is clean. Day 5 and day 6, she spots again. So now let's do the calculation. There's 3 days of bloods in total, and there's 3 days of tuhar in total. What Imam Muhammad's view and condition? That firstly, the bloods must be more than 3 days, and the second is the tuhar must be more than the bloods on either of its sides. So you got 3 and you got 3. Firstly, it is not, the tuhar itself is not, sorry, the tuhar must be more than 3 days, and the tuhar must be more than the bloods on either of its sides. So you're looking at 3 days of bloods, 3 days of tuhar. So definitely the first condition is not fulfilled, because the tuhar is not more than 3 days, it's not 4 days. And number 2, the tuhar is equal to the bloods on either of its sides. The tuhar is supposed to be more than the bloods on either of its sides. So the 2 conditions are not fulfilled again. So Imam Muhammad's view coincides with Imam Abu Yusuf's view in saying that it is counted as a continuous flow of blood from day 1 to day 6. Here again, there is no difference of opinion. The result is it equals to 3 days of bloods and 3 days of tuhar. The tuhar is not more than 3 days and is equal to the bloods on either of its sides. It counts as 6 days continuous flow of blood. So here again, no difference of opinion. We're going to look at the last example, and there we will see the condition of Imam Muhammad and see the difference of opinion. Question: does the amount on either side have to be combined to equal the days of tuhar between? And if the days of blood before and after are equal to the clean days, what is the rule? So look, here we're just looking at number. The question is how many days of blood in total and how many days of tuhar in total. So you just look at the days of bloods, 3 days. Just look at the days of tuhar, 3 days. Then we look at whether this fulfills the condition of Imam Muhammad or not. His condition is that the tuhar must be more than 3 days. So here we look at it, is only 3 days. It has to be at least 4 days or more to fulfill the first condition. And secondly, if that was the case, the tuhar would have to be more in number in comparison to the total number of bloods. So here 2 conditions are not fulfilled, and therefore there is no difference of opinion. Imam Muhammad also follows the view that everything is counted and there is no separator here. Looking at the last example to understand the difference of opinion. She spots for 3 days, then she is clean for 5 days, then she spots for 1 day, right? So day 1, day 2, day 3, she spots, right? Then she is clean for 5 days, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, and day 8. And then she spots for 1 day on day 9. So again, let's get the numbers straight first. How many days of blood? 4 days of blood. How many days of tuhar? 4 days of tuhar, right? Let's look at whether it fulfills the condition of Imam Muhammad's view or not. So he says that the tuhar must be more than 3 days, in other words, 4 days or more. So we look here, we've got 4 days of tuhar, right? So first condition is fulfilled. Second condition, the tuhar must be more in number in comparison to the bloods. So here the bloods would be 4 days. So you got 5 days tuhar, 5 days tuhar and 4 days blood. So the tuhar is more in number in comparison to the bloods. So his two conditions are fulfilled. So what would be the result? The result is it equals to 4 days of bloods and 5 days of tuhar. Uh, this would mean, according to Imam Muhammad, the first 3 days are counted as haydh, as the tuhar is more than 3 days and the tuhar is more than the bloods on either of its sides. So according to Imam Muhammad, his view is that the first 3 days will be counted as haydh, and now the separator, according to his two conditions, comes here, and it will separate the blood on day 9. So he'll say, listen, only first 3 days counted as haydh. The last day on day 9, that's actually not counted as a day of haydh. That will be Istihaadhah. So for instance, this will be beneficial for a woman who is in Hajj or Umrah. So let's say she spotted on those 3 days, right? She made ghusl, and now she's doing a tawaf of Hajj or Umrah on day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8, on either of these days. And then all of a sudden she spots on day 9, right? So technically what will happen, you'll say that her Hajj or Umrah has become invalid because she was technically in the state of haze on day 4, day 5, day 6, and day 7, and on day 8. So in order to preserve and protect her Hajj and Umrah, she will approach her Mufti. The Mufti will look at this, her situation, and say, listen, according to Imam Muhammad, it's possible to preserve your Hajj or preserve your Umrah. And he'll give fatwa and say that these days are actually days of Tuhar, which qualify as a separator according to Imam Muhammad, and therefore it doesn't affect your Hajj, it doesn't affect your Umrah. So this becomes beneficial and necessary in exclusive circumstances. But this is not the general case. The fatwa again is given on whose view? The fatwa is given on Imam Abu Yusuf's view, who says that from day 1 to day 9, it is counted as one continuous flow of blood. Right? Why? Because a tuhr naqis, anything that is less than 15 days, will not count as a separator. It is counted as a combiner. It is counted as a joiner. Okay, so we've looked at these three examples to understand the difference of opinion. Now we look at two more examples, one of a beginner woman and the second of a habitual woman. These two examples are being shown to show you that it is possible that a haze starts with spotting but ends in tuhar. And the second example we'll show you is where it is possible for an entire haze period from start to end to be in a clean period. In other words, there's no spotting there whatsoever, but it's actually counted as haze. So let's look at the first example. A beginner woman spots for 1 day, then she is clean for 14 days, then she spots for 1 day, right? The example here is to show you that everything has occurred within 15 days, not after 15 days, because if you count it after 15 days, then that's actually a separator. But here we're looking at everything within a 15-day period. So although you see 1, 14, and 1, technically in terms of numbers, it will go over 15, it will go into 16. But here we're looking at perhaps the last hour of that day on day 1, and on the last day, the first hour on that day, so that it all occurs and appears within a 15-day period. All right. So let's look at the example, the calendar. Day 1, she spots, right? Then she is clean right up till day 15. Before the full 15 days has passed, she spots again, right? So in other words, there's a spotting at the start of the 15 and there's a spotting right before the end of the 15. Now, she's a beginner woman, right? Number one. Number two, the rule of tuhr naqis and a deficient purity is that it is not a separator, it is a combiner. So technically speaking, this is a tuhr naqis, number one. Number two, when you count it as a combiner, it means technically it is counted as continuous flow of blood from the first spotting right till the last spotting. When you count it in that way, then you have exceeded the 10-day period. You have exceeded the 10-day period. And the rule is, in regards to a beginner woman, when she exceeds the 10-day period, she has to follow her last habit, but she doesn't have a last habit. In that case, she follows a predetermined habit of 10 days, and the rest will be counted as istihaadhah. So we'll say that from day 1 to day 10, those days will be counted as days of hayd, and the rest of it just before 15 days has terminated will be counted as istihaadhah. So this is an example to show you of tuhr naqis being counted as a combiner of blood. So there's a few rules that you've come across so far. The first is the 3-day rule and the 10-day rule. The second is the 15-day separator rule. And then the third is the 15, we're just saying 15 to round it off, but it's actually less than 15. The 15-day combiner rule. So within that 3 days, within that 10 days, overlapping those 3 and 10 days, you have to consider a tuhr naqis, a combiner of bloods that also affects the calculation of hayd. So you're actually looking at 3, 10 and 2 types of 15, one a separator and one a combiner. So looking at the result, day 1 to day 15 is counted as continuous flow of blood. As it exceeded 10 days, she reverts to her previous predetermined habit of 10 days hayd. The first 10 days are hayd, and the days thereafter will be counted as istihaadhah. So looking at the second part of the calendar, we see the result 10 days, first 10 days hayd, and the rest of it will be counted as istihaadhah. Right? So all this has occurred within a 15-day period. It hasn't exceeded a 15-day period. Now let's look at an example of a habitual woman. All right, she's got a habit. She spots. Okay, before we move on to this example, take note of this example where day 1 was a day of spotting and day 10 is actually a clean period. This is an example where it's possible for a hayd to start with blood and end in tuhr. So technically there was, we're counting it as a legal period or continuous period of flow of blood, but there was no literal flow of blood on day 10. So it started with blood, but it didn't end with blood, it ended with tuhr. The second example, a habitual woman spots on the first day, 1 day before her habit, then she is clean for 10 days, and then she spots 1 day after her habit. All right. So again, let's look at the tuhr naqis period, the 15-day combiner period. Right, she spotted on day 1 of the calendar, and then she spotted on day 12 of the calendar. The first spotting, she spotted 1 day before her actual habit, and after that she spotted 1 day after her habit. So now we've got the same story here. It's less than 15 days. We'll count everything from day 1 to day 12 as one continuous flow of blood. However, in this case, for now, you're not going to understand the place of habit in terms of its number, etc. So just ignore that rule for now and just understand that everything is going to be counted as one continuous flow of blood. However, because she has a place of habit, numbers of habit, and it fulfills those rules and conditions which we're going to discuss in the next few slides, we will count everything from day 2 on the calendar right till day 11 on the calendar, a total of 10 days hayd. So in other words, when we do this, we say that her hayd has actually started in a tuhr, in a clean period, and her hayd has actually ended in a tuhr, in a clean period. So that is why it's important to understand this tuhur naqis and this combiner. When you do that, and then you look at the rules of number of habit, place of habit, etc., you realize that it is possible for a haze to start in a clean period and to end in a clean period without any literal bloods occurring or appearing in between them. So the result is the entire period from the first spotting before her habit and the first spotting after her habit is counted as continuous flow of blood. The middle 10 days of her usual habit will be counted as 10 days haze, even though she was clean on those days. If her previous habit was less than 10 days, she will follow her previous habit. The 1 day blood before and after her usual habit is Istihaadhah. So yeah, this is assuming if her last habit was 10 days. If her last habit was, let's say, 8 days, then you will count it as 8 days, and the days or the bloods thereafter will be counted as Istihaadhah. So these are two examples, one of a beginner woman and one of a habitual woman, where the Tuhr Naqis applies. And the first example we showed you, day 1 was a spotting, but it ended in a clean period. And the second example we showed you, where from day 1 to day 10, the last day, there was no spotting of literal blood whatsoever, but it was actually counted as days of haze. So now you see, and you're understanding so far, it's not about what you feel about it. It's all about what you're seeing, and it all comes down to the calculation of it. So far we've discussed tuhr naqis in regards to haze. Now we'll be moving on to tuhr naqis in regards to nifas. Would this fatwa still apply even if a woman is on a pill, the one just discussed? Remember, the pill is simply a medical intervention. It does not affect what you see. As long as you see some blood, it still has to be taken into account, even if you're on the pill. So the pill doesn't change the rules of haze or nifas in any way. Yes, if there's no blood that exits, etc., then that's a different case because you're not seeing anything. But if you took the pill and for some reason you started spotting, we're still going to count it because it's all about what you see. It's not about what you've taken, what pill you're on. If the woman made ghusl after her day 2, when she saw she stopped bleeding, and perform her salah in those non-bleeding days, is that all discounted? So let's look at those two examples again, right? Day 1, she spotted and then she stopped. What would she do? She'd make wudu and she'll continue as normal. Same with the other example. She'd do the same. She spotted and then she stopped. She'll make wudu and carry on with everything. So remember, everything, almost everything in hayd and nifas is calculated and determined retrospectively. So on that day 1 in the first example and on that day 1 in the second example, she does not know for sure, for certain, that it's going to be hayd or not. She'll continue as normal. She'll perform a salah, she'll keep a fast, etc. Technically speaking, let's say for some, Allah forbid, she met in an accident, she passed away on day 5 in the first example, and in the second example, what is she going to be held accountable for? When she is in the court of Allah Ta'ala, she didn't know at that point in time it would be hayd, obviously, because now she's passed away. She will be held accountable to what was applicable to her at that point in time. So she'll be questioned regarding the salah, she'll be questioned regarding the fast, because it was not determined finally that those were the days of hayd. She was actually clean. However, if now she, nothing of that happened, and the last day came, in the first example and in the second example, that entire period is counted as one flow of blood. And let's say she's kept those salahs won't count. There's no qaza for those salahs, and she won't be held accountable for performing it in that state because she didn't know that legally that was her condition. But in regards to the fast, obviously, now let's say it's the month of Ramadan, she will have to make a record of it, And because now she is determined the invalidated fast, retrospectively, she'll keep it afterwards. Okay. Coming to the tuhr naqis and the deficient purity of nifas. Right? So far we know that any bloods that occur within a nifas period is counted as one continuous flow of blood. Now we look at the example where there's a 15 days or rather that tuhar that occurs between the bloods. So the example is she spots for 5 days, then she is clean for 15 days, then she spots for 5 days, then she is clean for another 15 days, and then she has continuous flow of blood. Let's look at the chart, right? This is a full 40-day period. So from on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5, she spots. Then she is clean for the next 15 days. Then from day 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, she spots. And then again, she is clean for another 15 days. And then after that, those 15 days, she starts spotting again. She spots continuously, right? So now, what rule do we know so far? Is that a tuhar that occurs within a nifas period is counted as one continuous flow of blood. So if you look at the first bloods from 1 to 5, and then the second bloods 21 to 25, a tuhar has occurred between these two bloods of a nifas. So we'll count that entire period as one entire flow of blood. So she has experienced a flow of blood literally and legally from day 1 to day 25. So 25 days nifas so far, right? There's no doubt about that. Now, in regards to the last 15 days, right till day 40, she is clean, a full 15 days. What do we count that as? Can we count it as a combiner of bloods, or do we count it as a separator of bloods, right? So let's look at the result. The result is the first 25 days is nifas. We've determined that. There's no doubt about that. The first 15 days tuhar is a deficient tuhar as it appeared between two bloods within a 40-day nifas period. Keep in mind, between two bloods within a 40-day nifas period. Therefore, it is counted as continuous flow of blood. However, the second 15 days tuhar is a complete tuhar and separates the bloods as it did not appear between two bloods within a 40-day nifas period. So you can say that, listen, this last 15 days can actually, we should actually count it together because now you've got a blood exceeding thereafter. In other words, there's two bloods. You've got the 25th day of bloods, and then you got a 15-day tuhar, and then you got the 11th day of blood going forward. You can say, you know what, this 15 days has occurred between these two bloods, and therefore it should be combined. It should be combined and counted as, let's say, 40-day nifas. In other words, it's exceeded that period, but that's not the case here. The case here is that, yes, there is a 15-day tuhar period, but it has not occurred between two bloods within a nifas period. So that blood on day 11 is not within the nifas period. So if it's not within the nifas period, we cannot combine it and join it. Since the one blood is after the nifas period, this last 15 days of tuhar will actually be counted as a separator, not as a combiner. So you will not say, let's say her previous habit was 40 days. You cannot say, okay, no, it's exceeded the 40-day period, and therefore she must revert to her previous habit of, let's say, 40 days. No, it will be 25 days. In summary, this tuhar has occurred, yes, within a nifas period, but it has not occurred between two bloods within a nifas period, and therefore it qualifies as a separator, not as a combiner. This is one example. The second example is that she spots for 30 days, then she is clean for 10 days, and then she spots for 1 day, right? So 30 days spotting, no problem there on the first calendar. And towards the end, the last 10 days, she is clean. And then she spots on day 41, in other words, just after the Nifaas period. So let's Okay, so the question is coming. So even if she had a previous habit, we'd say it changed. Yes, so looking at the previous example, if in this case we're assuming, for instance, her last habit was 40 days, we'll say now it has changed from 40 days to 25 days. Why? Because this is valid blood, and the rule of valid blood in Nifaas is as long as it's blood within a 40-day period, it would be established accordingly as a habit. So yeah, it hasn't exceeded a period. It is just that you experience 25 days of blood within any fast period, and anything within a 40-day period of spotting is counted as valid blood, which is used to establish a habit. So looking at this example, the second example, 30 days of spotting, then she's clean at the last 10 days, and then she spots on day 41. All right. So now there's a difference of opinion here between Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. Imam Abu Yusuf says that 40 days is nifas, as it ended in a deficient tuhar, tuhar naqis. More so, a period can end whilst being clean if there are bloods on either of its ends. So the entire period is counted as continuous flow of blood. Right. So this previous example here was an example of tuhar tam, where it is actually counted as a separator. This example here is an example of tuhar naqis, where it is actually counted as a combiner. So now we're looking at the last 10 days, right? We know that if a tuhar is under 15 days, it will be counted as a combiner. So here we look at it, it's under 15 days, number one. Number two, when we've got bloods at the start of it and the end of it, it is counted as one continuous flow of blood. In this case, it is because it's not a full 15 days, we can't actually count it as a separator. It's less than that. We are now going to count it as a combiner. When we count it as a combiner, we're actually going to say that from day one right till day 41 of the nifas, she actually experienced literal and legal flow of blood. When we say that and it exceeds the 40-day nifas, now assuming again a woman's previous habit is 40 days, we'll say now it is 40 days and not actually 30 days. Right? Or if it's a beginner woman, we'll say that she moves to her predetermined habit of a full 40 days and not just 30 days. So that's according to Imam Abu Yusuf. He says a deficient tuhar naqis, that is experienced within a nifas period is counted as one continuous flow of blood. So this is a case where it's counted within and not after. Imam Muhammad says that the first 30 days is nifas. The first 30 days is nifas. And why does he say that? We looked at the example previously. He's got two conditions. The two conditions is what? Number one, the tuhar must be more than 3 days. And number two, the tuhar must be more than the bloods on either of its sides. All right. So yeah, if you look at remember we're counting from day 30 right till the end, right? So he says that the tuhar here is obviously more. You count from day 1 to day 10, that's 10 days of tuhar. And then you count the bloods on either of its sides. You got 1 day blood there and 1 day blood before that. He says that, listen, this type of tuhar, where the tuhar is more than the bloods, is counted as a separator. So he says, listen, it's not actually 40 days or, the full period. It's only 30 days. So this is again where we see the difference between Imam Abu Yusuf's view and Imam Muhammad's view. Again, the fatwa is given on Imam Abu Yusuf's view, where the entire period is counted as one continuous flow of blood. the sister can make that question a bit more clearer so we can understand the question to answer it. Okay. So this brings us to the end of the discussion of Tuhr Naqis and deficient purities. Now moving on to the next discussion, universal principles and maxims regarding habits, right? A question came previously as to when does a woman's habit actually change? So according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf, they say a habitual woman's habit is established changes if she experiences a valid haze or nifas or tuhar once, right? So she experiences any one of them, we will count her as a mu'tada, a habitual woman, and her habit obviously will change accordingly. So last month it was 5 days, this month it is 6 days, the habit has changed. Last month the tuhar was 25 days, this month the tuhar is 23 days, the tuhar has changed. Last birth of the child was 25 days, this time it's 35 days, it's changed. So experience it once, it changes. According to Imam Muhammad, he says a habitual woman's habit is established, changes if she experiences a valid haze, nifas, or tuhar twice. He doesn't follow his view doesn't align with Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf's view. He says that, you know what, if you experience last month 5 days, this month you experience 6 days, your habit hasn't actually changed. You have to experience 6 days one more time to actually count your habit as changed. The view again is not on Imam Muhammad's view. The fatwa is on Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf's view. So when we gave that example of Imam Muhammad, we're looking at the 15-day Tuhr Naqis, right? So even if you look at 15 days in total, right, 10, 11, and you take 1 day of blood or up to 15. In other words, up to 15 days, we're looking at whether this type of tuhar can count as a separator according to him. So when you're looking at 15 days, obviously you've got more tuhar than bloods on either of the sides when you're looking at a full 15-day period. So according to him, the tuhar is way more than the bloods on either of its sides, and therefore, if that's the case, he counts it as a separator, not as a combiner. Right? So we're discussing habits now. Right? So remember, in regards to habits, you've got habits in terms of number one, number, and number two, place. So there's two things that you have to look at: the change of number and the place of the habit. So we look at these examples. A habitual woman spots at the beginning of every month from day 1 to day 5. In the following month, she spots from day 1 to day 6. So let's look at the calendar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where the stars are. That is her habit at the beginning of every month. So she has thereafter a 25-day tuhar period. Take a 30-day calendar minus 25. First 5 days is a habit, and the rest of it is tuhar. 25 days tuhar in total, right? However, in the following month, she spots again in the same place. However, she spots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. One more day extra. So the view is on Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf's view. They say that once she experiences a change in number, it will automatically change. So going forward, we are going to say her habit has changed from 5 days to 6 days. So the number of her habit has changed. And we know the rule that valid bloods are used to establish habits. If it is 3 days or more, 10 days or less, it will change the habit. And this just has to happen once. The result is her 5 days haze habit changes to a 6-day haze habit as she experienced a valid haze once, according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf. However, according to Imam Muhammad, it remains 5 days. It will only change if she experiences a 6-day spotting in the following month again. All right? So according to him, he'll still count it as 5 days. The 6th day will only be counted if she experiences it one more time. But we don't follow that view. You follow the view of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf. Another example, and this example is in regards to the place of habit that has changed, right? So the number and the place, both of them change once. Once you experience a change once, it's changed. There's no need to experience it a second time. So a habitual woman spots at the beginning of every month. And remember, why we're saying habitual woman is because she got an adat, she got an habit. If she's a beginner woman, she's got no habit, so we can't actually speak about her. All right. Here we're speaking about a woman that's got a habit and how and when those habits change. So she spots at the beginning of every month from day 1 to day 5. In the following month, she spots from day 6 to day 10, right? Looking at the calendar again, 1 to 5, that's a habit she spots every month, and she's clean for the rest of the month for 25 days, right? But on this occasion, she's actually clean for 30 days. Before we move on with this example, I'd like to introduce you to a different method of calculation, right? I'm just going to put it up on the board. We looked at one example so far, right? Where the number has changed, not the place has changed. So let's look at the first example, right? So uh, 25 days is a tuhar, T for tuhar, right? 5 days is where she spots, 5B, B for bloods. And then she is clean again 25 days. And then she spots, instead of 5 days, now she spots 6 days. Now, we've been showing you calendars so far. The calendar is just there to understand the ruling itself. Uh, However, practically speaking, when you come to a mufti and you tell a mufti that, listen, I spotted from this day of the month to that day of the month, he has to now sit down and put down the calculation in this way to actually understand what's happening. So the better way of doing it, if you want to make the mufti's life easier and your life easier as well, is to do it in this way. So you'll calculate on your calendar how many days tuhar you had, and you'll put down there 25 days. Then your bloods that you had, 5 days of bloods. You don't actually put the date, you just put the number, right? And then 25 again and 6 again. So now the easiest way to look at what has changed is firstly look at the tuhars, right? The first tuhar day is 25, the second tuhar day is another 25. So that hasn't changed, there's no change there, right? Then you look at 5B and then you look at 6B afterwards. Something has changed. What has changed? The number has changed and it's gone up from 5 to 6. So according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf, when you experience a change once, whether it's in regards to the number of bloods, whether it's in regards to the number of days in Tuhar, it changes automatically. So the result here is actually 25 days Tuhar is your habit, and 16 days bloods is your haze habit. So when anyone asks you, you say, listen, my habit is 25 days and my haze days or my haze habit is actually 6 days. All right. Okay, so we looked at that one example, firstly on the calendar, And then secondly, we looked at it in terms of the calculation and numbers. We look at the second example where she spots at the beginning of the month 5 days, she's clean for the rest of the month 25 days. But this time now, it's not just 25 days, she's clean at the start of the second month again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In other words, she is now clean for 30 days. And then she spots 5 more days, day 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So what has changed here? The number in terms of haze remains the same. However, the place of her habit has now changed, right? Her place of habit has now changed. She is not experiencing a spotting after 25 days. She is experiencing a spotting after 30 days, right? So the easiest way to do it is to say that, start with saying 25T and then saying 5B. And now you're not going to say 25T, you're going to say 30T because it's changed from 25 to 30. And then you'll say again 5B. If you put those numbers down, you will see very easily what has actually changed. The tuhar number has increased, and if that has increased, it means that the place of the habit has changed, number one. And number two, the number of the haze hasn't changed in any way. It's just the place of the haze habit has changed. So in other words, when you've got an increase of tuhar, then automatically you will get a change of place in habit. Okay, moving on with the lesson. So it's changed actually from 25 to 30, and the place of habit has changed. The result is her 5 days haze habit remains the same, but the place of habit from day 1 to day 5 now changes to from day 6 to day 7. Okay, now looking at a change of habitual number of days in the place of habit. So a habitual woman spots at the beginning of every month from day 1 to day 5 and is clean for 25 days. In the following month, she spots at the beginning of the month from day 1 to day 3 and is clean for 25 days. So again, let's start with the tuhar because that's easy to work with. 25T, number one. Number two, 5B, right, at the beginning of the month. Number three, 25T again towards the end of the month. And then again, it is the days of blood, but here it is 3B and then 25T, right? So when you look at these numbers, it's very easy to identify what has changed. Obviously, the number of haze has changed from 5 and has now reduced to 3. So her 5 days haze habit changes to a 3 days haze habit in the place of habit. So the full habit or the place hasn't fully changed, but the number in the place of habit has changed. All right. So when that has happened, you also look at the tuhar that comes day after 25 days. The tuhar number hasn't changed, but now we're going to say that the place of habit of the tuhar has changed, and now it's not actually starting from day 6 onwards, it actually starts from day 4 onwards. So now you see the change in number one, in place of habit, and also you look at the place of habit change in terms of tuhar, right? Now we look at the change of habitual number of days in the place of habit. So a habitual woman spots at the beginning of every month from day 1 to day 5 and is clean for 25 days. In the following month, she spots at the beginning of the month from day 1 to day 5 and is clean for 23 days. So same example as before, 25T, 5B, and then 25T again, and again 5B. Right? The only difference you're going to notice now is that instead of saying 25T at the end, you're going to say 23T because the tuhar is 23 days. So what has happened here? Obviously, the haze hasn't been affected in terms of number and in terms of place. In terms of the place of the tuhar, also it hasn't been affected. However, the number of the tuhar in the place of habit has now reduced from 25 to 23 days. So the result is her 25 days tuhar habit changes to a 23 days tuhar habit in the place of habit. The last example we'll leave for the next lesson, as it requires more attention and requires more focusing. We'll continue in the next lesson from that example onwards, inshallah. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.